The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Jason Hammond. I'm the Director of Product Management at TechExcel. And today we're going to be talking about quality management and specifically our solution, DevSuite, and how you can use it to improve your quality management. Before I start talking about DevSuite and our product, I just wanted to let you know that this webinar will be recorded and it will be sent to you as an email link afterwards in the next couple days. Also, I will be answering questions at the end of the webinar too, so you can use the questions interface on the toolbar on your right to ask any questions you may have, and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. This webinar is scheduled for about 30 minutes today, so we'll give you kind of a high-level overview of DevSuite and how it can be used for your quality management. Now, DevSuite is a suite of tools that allows you to plan from requirements through project planning, implementation tracking and defect tracking, as well as QA test management. Today, we're mainly going to focus on DevTest, but we'll also show how DevTest interacts with some of the other modules too as part of the quality lifecycle. In terms of quality management, there's a lot of challenges that organizations face when implementing a quality management process. A lot of times, organizations may need to test across multiple environments, which can be challenging. There may be a disconnect between product requirements and the tests that are being run, so it's difficult to know whether or not you're testing all the requirements, or perhaps you might be testing requirements that are not even part of the finished product. It can also be challenging in terms of how to identify which test cases need to be rerun. You often might default to just a process of rerunning everything. There's also many challenges around having reporting or other metrics that can help you see how your quality is trending over time. And then finally, there's often a disconnect between your test case management and a place to log those defects in a way to ensure that they're being regressed properly. So our solution, DevSuite, will address each of these challenges, and as I go through the webinar, we will cover the following topics. We'll talk about the benefits of test case reuse and standardization, how you can use test case shortcuts for multi-level analysis. I will show you the tools that you can use to analyze your results and develop new tests from those results. We'll see all the real-time metrics and planning tools that are available. Finally, we'll show traceability in terms of spawning test cases from requirements and then also showing the traceability matrix. It's meant to be an overview of the tool, and if you do have any questions, just make sure you use that questions toolbar on the right. So now I'm going to show you DevSuite. So whenever a user logs into DevSuite, they'll be met with a dashboard that allows them to see the metrics that they would want to see in their process. So based on your account types, you may see any of the following modules, and you can pull data from any of those modules onto your dashboard. So you can see that I may have a report related to how our development's going. So maybe we're an agile team and we want to see how our burn down report looks for a specific sprint we're working on. I can also see how many test cases are assigned to me or bugs that are assigned to me too. You can also toggle and see how many bugs you've submitted and what the status of those are. Any reports that I show you in the webinar, later in the webinar, can be added to your dashboard too, so you can see other types of graphic reports too. Maybe you want to see a distribution of work among the team in terms of who has requirements that need to be approved or who has test cases that still need to be run. Any of those sorts of metrics can be added to your dashboard, and each user can have their own custom dashboard. If you want, you can also push specific reports or messages to everyone's dashboard. So any quality management project or development project in general is going to begin with defining requirements. It's really critical to define your requirements in a way that can help both the implementation team as well as the test team. So we're going to start off by talking about requirements management and by moving to the requirements view in DevSuite. Within our requirements view, we provide you with an interface that allows you to store your requirements in a tree structure so you can organize your requirements by projects or products, and then you can further organize them within that tree, maybe by functional area or by the types of requirements that you're managing. Over on the right, when I look at any of the particular folders, I can see the details of each requirement and the columns representing the fields that I've selected to include. We also have some special fields that are included that can see, one, whether or not a requirement that you have is already linked to a test case, and you can also see how far along in terms of completion each requirement is. Down below, I can see the details of my requirements, and this is a fully customizable interface that allows you to have the fields of your choice present. All of the modules that I'll be showing you today have a point-and-click admin that easily allows you to add new fields and rearrange the layout of those fields as needed. New requirements can be added easily to the system via dialog, so I can just go ahead and fill out a new form to represent a new requirement. So I can have new requirements. Or I can also choose to add new requirements via import. So I can right-click on any folder, and I can choose to import in requirements from text or XML or Excel. So it's easy to add new requirements to the system. And then once your requirements are in the system, you'll be able to see a number of different properties related to them. So for each of my requirements, I'll be able to see, if there's more than one version of the requirement. So you can actually automatically generate new versions of each requirement based on changes made to it. So if someone updates the description or other important fields, you can have DevSpec auto version that requirement. So there's another version listed here. Once you have multiple versions, you can actually roll back to previous versions, or of course view the previous versions too, so you know what has changed since then. We're also going to have a full history of everything that happened with each requirement, so that if you do want us to have an audit trail of any changes that were made, if you're in a environment that requires you to be in compliance with various regulations, you can have that audit trail to ensure that all the changes are locked down based on what state they're in also. For each of the requirements, I'll also be able to see the artifacts that they're linked to. And in just a moment, I'll show you how we link a requirement to new artifacts in the development process. The process of linking requirements to test cases and implementation items will provide you with traceability, so that at the end of the demo, when we want to look at some of the reports, including a traceability report, we'll be able to know with confidence that each requirement has actually been implemented and tested, and that we can release the product with confidence that it is going to be of high quality. I can see all those linked artifacts by looking at the All Links page, which will provide me with one view to see all of the linked properties, so I can see whether there's linked development items that the team is working on, or whether there are linked test cases that the test team is working on. If I want to view specific linked areas, I can also view them in their own pages too, or you could choose to just use one page to represent all the data. Each requirement can also have a workflow, and that workflow will be driven by the buttons that I see here. Each of the modules itself has its own workflow, so that you can have a workflow for requirements, bugs, or test cases to suit the needs that you may have. Once I have defined all of my requirements, then two parallel processes are really going to start. First, the development team is going to take these items and start working on them. And second, the test team is going to start developing test cases from them. In both cases, from the requirements view, I can start those processes here, or I can choose to let the teams that are working in the other views choose to pull these items into their view. If I want to push an item to the development team or create a test case from it, I can easily right-click on an item and say I want to assign it to development, or if you're using an Agile methodology, you could assign it to a backlog if you'd rather do that instead. I'm going to go ahead and assign this particular requirement to our development team. And to do that, I can see what development projects are available. So in this case, maybe I want to assign it to the newest version of our application content sharing manager. And then based on my selection, the automation within DevSuite can allow me to create additional tasks automatically for the development team to work on. So in this case, I'm automatically going to create a task to work on the documentation for this item and actual development, and even a unit test for the programmer to perform after they've completed the development. I can pick what milestone, sprint, or iteration I want to add the item to, and I can also update the properties of these tasks too. In terms of who they will be assigned to, I can assign story points or spec points to them, and also assign time values. So by clicking OK, I'm going to establish traceability between that requirement and the development items that are now part of the implementation of it. And I can see the progress bar to let me know how far along they are in implementing those. For test cases, I can choose to push a test case directly from the requirements view also by selecting the test library that I want to send it to and then clicking New. But in just a moment, I'll show you, I think, an even better way to grab requirements from the requirement view and create test cases from them. So now, because we're going to focus on quality management today, I'm going to move on to the testing view, and we're going to talk about creating your test library from your requirements, planning those test cases, executing them, and then submitting bugs related to them. The testing view within DevSuite is made up of two separate views. One that represents the library of tests, and then a second view that allows you to see your test plans and track the execution of your test cases. Within the test library, you can organize your tests by functional area, project, or product in a similar manner that you might do in the requirements view. The testing view is really made up of two views to enable you to reuse your test cases. And the benefits of reusing your test cases tend to be pretty straightforward, but should you need to run multiple regressions against a test case, you can utilize the same test cases for each version of the product that comes out. Where test cases are shared across multiple products or projects, you can also use that through the test case reuse too. For each of the areas, I'll see the test cases I've created and the details of the test cases below. Now, within our testing view, we have a number of different tools that are built into the interface that allows you to do things like add additional steps to a test case. So I may have a single test case that might require multiple test cases, multiple steps to be run before I can call it completed. That just allows you to structure those steps in a single, double, multi-column setting. It also allows you to define variables that can be used to construct these steps automatically for you. For each test, we can have a workflow that can allow you to determine whether or not a test is ready to be used in a test plan. So in this case, this test is in an approved state, but I may have other tests that are in a draft state and not quite ready to be shared with the work projects where you're creating your test plans. For each of the test cases, we're also going to have a full history, and additionally, I'll be able to see for each of the test cases how many times it's been executed and what the status of each of those executions are. If I am testing multiple environments, I can also define for each test area or test case all of the applicable environments that that test case could be used for or should be tested on. By defining these environment variables, it does two things within the tool. One, when I create a test plan, it'll allow me to use these as a filter. So if I am testing Mac OS X and Windows 8 for our application, it'll make sure it pulls test cases that are applicable for at least one of these two. I can combine that with other environment variables too, like language or browser or any other variables you'd like to define yourself that would be relevant to your process, and then it'll create combinations of those platforms and languages, which we'll see in a minute when we create a test plan. In terms of links to development items and requirements, I can see those items on the All Links page in a similar fashion to what I would see in the requirements view. Now, right now, I'm looking at a test case that does not have any linked requirements. So when I want to create test cases, I did mention that there is an easier way to create test cases from requirements in the testing view, and I'm going to show you that in just 1 second. So before I do that, I did want to point out that we have the same import methods that we do in the requirements view. So I can import in from an Excel spreadsheet that I may have already, or I can, of course, use a dialog to submit a test case. But if I want to make sure that my tests are all linked to requirements, I can utilize functionality built in the tool to do so. So I'm going to create a folder, new tests from requirements. And in that folder, I can select this button here that will allow me to choose from my requirements tree all of the requirements that I want to create test cases from. I can see the tree here. I can pick one or more requirements, and then by clicking link, it will automatically create a test case from each of the requirements I selected. So now each of these items has a placeholder test case that has the title mapped over, the description, and also a link has already been formed between this test and this requirement. So later, when I create my traceability report, these will already be linked, and there will be no additional linking that's required. Also, should this requirement change, I can also have a flag appear that lets me know that the linked requirement has changed, that the test case may need to be updated. After creating the requirements from the test cases from the requirements, I may want to add additional steps, so I can go ahead and do that. So I'll go ahead and add some new steps. Log into the app, the home page, and I can just tab through these and easily create more. And we can add as many steps as we want. So each of these steps will have to be verified by the tester, and then the steps will then drive the status of the task that we run. So once I've created my library of tests, either from my requirements, from dialog, or from one of the import methods that we support, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to move on to the task view, and we're going to see our test plans and create new ones and then run those tests. So the first thing you probably notice when we move into the task view is that we have an additional tree that represents our products or projects and our test plans and test assignments. So just like in the requirements view, you can have corresponding test spaces that correspond to the same projects that exist in the requirements. Or you can choose to have separate ones that are not necessarily linked to them. The process of creating new test plans is all wizard-driven, and I will show you that in just 1 minute. But for now, I also want to point out that down below, we have a dashboard that allows me to see roll-up metrics from the folders that I'm selected here. So in this case, I might want to pick, a product that we have, and then I can even drill down and see specific metrics based on a functional area from the test library if I want to. I can view this roll-up data by team or environment if I want to, and then I can also use other filters like status. So if I only want to see all the items that have failed or how many items failed in a particular area, I can do that too. To create a new test plan, all I need to do is pick the project that I want to create a test plan in. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's create a new test plan for our instant messenger project. So I'm going to call this IM version 6. And if I want to be able to submit bugs into our defect tracking view, the tracking view that we just previously pushed some development items into, we can do that. Our testing view also supports integrations with Bugzilla, Mantis, and Jira too, if you'd like to submit into any of those. Or we also have APIs and other special actions built into the UI so you can integrate with other third-party tools also. Next, I can pick what team members I want to include in this test plan. That's a great feature if you have a very large test team and you want to narrow it down to 5, 10 people or however many you need to run the test plan. Next, I'm going to pick the environments that we're going to be testing. So I might pick all of my platforms and all of my languages. And of course, these can be customized too, so that you could add other variables like browser or device or carrier or anything else that might be relevant to your process. After I've selected my environment variables, I will get a list of possible combinations. So for each of the OSs, I can pick which of the languages I'm concerned about. So maybe as a company, we're only supporting certain languages or OSs going forward. And then based on that, I will see the folders from the test library, and they've been pruned to show me only the test cases that are relevant to the environments that I picked. And I can go ahead and add the test cases that I want. Now, based on those selections, it looks like I'm about to create a test plan that has quite a bit of test coverage in it. So it has 714 possible test cases for about 11 hours of test coverage. The time is being derived from the estimations that you can put into the test case at the library level. When I click Finish, I will have created that test plan, and then I will be able to create new test assignments from it. So now to create a new test assignment, it's going to be driven by the same wizard that we were using before, but I can add additional properties like build number. So let's say we're going to test build 10, and like to finish running those tests by this Friday. But maybe for now we're just going to test, our core platforms and languages. So I can see now within the tree, I'll only see the folders that contain test cases that are part of my test plan, and then I can choose to assign out as many as I'd like. Now, DevTest will keep track of the metrics to let me know what percentage of my total coverage I'm actually working on, so that if I only assign out 22 of my 700 test cases now, I'll be able to track how far along in terms of completion we are. I'm going to go ahead and assign out these first 22. And now we have our first test cycle on assignment. So I've assigned out test cycle 1, which is build 10. Plan finish date's Friday, 22 tasks. So far, no bugs found, and nothing has been completed yet. I assigned everything to a group folder called to be assigned, and then I can further drill down and assign out to individuals, or I could have done that during the wizard. But I'm going to, right now, go ahead and assign each of these items to a couple different owners. So I'm going to assign half to James. I'm going to assign everything that's in the client folder to Terry. I could update any other properties too if I have permission to do so. So it's really up to you whether or not you want to give people permission to assign out group edit items or assign them to other people. So now when I look at the roll-up of data here, I can see that I have assigned several to Terry and some to James, and then I still have some that are to be assigned. When it comes time for your team to start executing these test cases, They can toggle back to the task details view. I should mention that not all users will see the planning data rollups. It's based on a permission. So, if your testers are not making new test cycles or test plans, they may log in and only see a list of the items assigned to them and the details of those test cases below. It's really up to you in terms of what sort of permissions are assigned to each individual. Users can update any of their test cases using the buttons that you see here, which are going to be based on the workflow that you've assigned for each of the test tasks. So I can move a test to a pass state. Any fields that are mandatory will be marked red to let me know that they need to be filled out. And I can go ahead and enter a time value there and move on and move to the next one. Where test cases fail, we'll also see, I'll see that a different set of fields might be mandatory. So in this case, I do want an actual result logged also. And now when I click Save, we can also prompt the user to submit bugs into our defect tracking tool or the other tools that I mentioned. When using our defect tracking tool, when I click OK, fields will be mapped over, so I can see the title, as well as any steps that were assigned to the user have also been mapped over. You can also choose to map over all of the fields that are present on the task, so things like platform, browser could all be mapped over also, automatically. So now we've gone ahead and logged a bug against that particular test case. So now we have a requirement that spawned a test case, spawned a test task, that's now spawned a bug. In just a moment, we'll see how you can see that in the traceability matrix. Also, while I'm running my test cases, I can easily see whether or not this test case has ever failed before. So I can look and see a full history of this test case and see perhaps a bug's already been logged, and maybe I want to choose to link it to a bug instead. And of course, we'll have that full history too, in terms of what happened. Now, when it comes time to create a new test cycle, I did want to show you that there's a number of tools that are available at your disposal. First off, I can create test cycles from existing test cycles. This is a great way to create a new smoke test that is just a copy of a previous test cycle you may have ran. So maybe you want to run a subset of your coverage every time you get a new build. You can easily do that. Click Finish, and away you go. Or you can choose to, instead, maybe you want to use some of the tools built in to do something different. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I want to, instead of selecting manually the test coverage, I want to show you that you can use our add coverage using query button to actually look for test coverage that might be able to run. So I could choose to run all the test cases that were failed in the last test cycle if I wanted, and it will return that one test case that I marked fail. So as you get more data into the tool, it makes it very easy to smartly plan what test coverage you need to run next. You can also use those queries to find things like test cases that are part of your plan that have not been executed yet, maybe test cases that were not completed also. And then as you assign out those test cases, of course, you'll still see in real time the roll-ups of how you're doing. So you'll see the defect count, pass rates and such, and also the time logged. Now this interface is really a planning dashboard that comes within DevTest, but DevTest and the other modules all have their own reporting also. We'll take a quick look at some of the reports that are available. As I mentioned several times, we do have a built-in traceability report. So if I do create my test cases from my requirements, or if I just choose to link newly created test cases to a requirement, I will see the requirement, any linked test cases that have been executed, and even bugs that have been submitted from them. With the traceability matrix, you can customize it and add the column choices that you'd like to it. You can also change the order and which development items are included in that. So if you were choosing to use DevTest as a standalone solution, and use a third-party defect tracking tool, you might choose to not have the link defect section enabled. We also have a number of graphic reports too, so that I can see for a particular test area. Maybe I want to see, I think if we look at the test plan that I just created, we might not see a lot of good data there, but let's look at another one, for example. But I can see for each of my test cycles how many items have been assigned and their status. Any drop-down fields that you add to the system, whether they're system-based like a status or owner, or maybe it's custom fields you've added like priority or severity or something, or module. All of those can be used for this sort of reporting, and you can choose to see either bar charts or pie charts too, based on your selections. If you choose to integrate dev tests with automation tools, you can also capture results within our tool and then use the same reporting for your manual and automated tests together. Finally, we also have list reports, so you can easily print out a list of maybe test cases that failed, or reports that show you data over time if you want to see by week, you know, how your plan's been going on a time basis by week or month or day. So that's kind of a brief overview of how DevSuite can be used for traceability and quality management. If you would like a more in-depth demo, we certainly would love to show you one that's more personalized for your needs. I'm going to go ahead and answer some of the questions that have been submitted, and then, you know, feel free to add questions now if you would like. Let's start with a couple questions. So the first question that we have is about email notification. Does this tool have email notification, and how is it used and configured? So email notification is used in a number of different ways within the tool. I can easily send an email based on an item on an ad hoc basis, so I can just right-click on an item and choose to send somebody an email about it. So I just click send, and then I can send someone a link to it and a message about this particular test item or bug or requirement. We also have built-in notification engines, which will allow you to set up rules like anytime a new test assignment is created, notify all the owners that they have a task that needs to be run. You can also set up other triggers like based on fields. So if I have a bug that's submitted that's a test blocker, for example, I might want to notify the QA manager that we have a test blocker and we need to address that quickly. So you can decide what email notifications are sent. And then for some of the modules, we also even have subscriptions. You can allow users to choose which emails they received, or they can opt out of certain emails that have been assigned to them. In addition to email notifications, we also have escalations too, so that if you wanted to set up an email notification anytime something's been open too long, or if you even want to change status of it or ownership of an item based on time passage, you can do that too. Next, there's a question about security and admin rights and how account privileges and such work in our tool. So we have very, very granular permissions that are assigned to each user via their account type. Each project and view has their own permissions. And for each user, you can decide things like, you know, within the testing view, whether they can see the trees, whether they can see other people's items. At each step in the workflow, you can decide who can move an item to the next state, what fields would be read-only, mandatory, or invisible. We also have additional permissions that can be used at a folder level too, to hide some folders from certain individuals or account types too. So it is extremely granular in that regard. Next, we have a question about automated tests. So this test can be used. This testing view can be used to manage both manual tests and automated tests. We use the same model for manual and automated tests in that you need to have an item in the library to represent each of the test cases you want to run. So if I want to store automated tests here, I can have an item in the library representing an automated test. I could choose to link a script to that particular item, or I might just use contents of a field to represent the control data that I want to pass. Then, in terms of scheduling, you would still create your tasks, and you can do that via our APIs, or you can do it manually. And then automated data can be passed back to DevTest via those same APIs. We have a couple different APIs. We have a RESTful API, we also have a Perl-based API, and we also have commands built into the interface so that you can send data via web URL or via command line. So there's a lot of different options that you can have in terms of integrating with automation tools. Okay. How do you deal with road mapping a test plan for a release cycle? In terms of if I want to schedule out my test plan into multiple test cycles in advance, I can do that. So I can schedule, I can either use our test cycle group concept, which I may or may not have, if I have an example of that. I can choose to create another level of folders underneath this to represent milestones, sprints, or other areas that are important to me in terms of how I want to roadmap out the tests that I will be running. I can also pre-assign my test cycles too and make them unavailable for the testers until a specific start date. So you could go ahead and plan out all of your test cycles that you wanted to run, and then you could easily add regression test cases to each of the planned test cycles as needed. Can you set up different test plans based on different client needs? Some clients may need different information embedded in a test plan. For each of the test plans I create, I'm able to specify specifically what test cases I wanted to include. So it certainly could be on a per client basis in terms of each of these test areas can be based on that. Another approach is because this view is based on has its own UI configured as different work projects, I could have a shared test library for our whole organization, but each new client deployment I have could have a completely different UI, different team, and different projects within it. So the architecture is really built in a way that would facilitate that so that you could have even a unique set of fields tracked for different client testing. See what other ones we may have here. A couple more questions. Is this a on-premise solution or is it a hosted solution? So it is, we have both options available. So you can either install it locally or you can use our cloud services to utilize the tool too if that is a preference to you. All right, one final question, and then unless there's any other questions. But if you do need information, feel free to reach out to us. Click on the next one, and we'll see my contact information here if you wanted to send me an email directly, or you can reach out to any of the request a demo links on our website. But the last question really was, can the tool be implemented separately? Is it modular? Do I have to use all of the tools together? So it is modular. You can choose to use all of DevSuite together with all the integration points, or you can mix and match the modules that you need. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. Feel free to follow up with me directly if you have any more questions about our tool, or you can request a demo on our website. Thanks a lot and have a great day.